Regional School Committee today on 10/25/2023 at 6:30 p.m.
Want me to let the citizens in?
Sure. Yeah, we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, so you guys can mute and I will lead. I have my guide. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, guys, so the first matter of business here is public comment. And I was notified by 3 different residents that they would like to engage in public comment this evening. So the first person is Ms. Amy Jo Conant. I think I said that right.
Yes.
Welcome. So for all public comment, it's typically limited to about 3 minutes, and then you can kind of take it from there. So if you tend to go over the 3 minutes, I'll just give you a little warning that it's time to wrap up.
Go quick.
Go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Amy Jo Conant, and I'm here with my husband, David. We live in Stowe, and our daughter is a senior at Nashoba. I wanted to start by saying thank you for your service on the committee. It's time away from your families, and my husband and I appreciate your commitment. I'm here tonight to talk about Nashoba's German exchange program. I believe the exchange program was started by Herr Pritcher, and that was teaching at Nashoba through the 2020 school year. The annual trip was postponed in spring of 2020, of course, when my daughter was a freshman taking German. It was also postponed in the spring of 2021 when she was a sophomore, with the hopes that it would be back on track for 2022. But we're now in the fall of 2023, and still our family and others don't know the status of the German exchange program. We've been told that German students are coming here, and by definition of an exchange program, it's assumed that our students will go there. Last week, I saw that DECA was approved for travel through the school committee. I saw the middle school principals speak for the DESE program. It's a trip that these seniors weren't able to attend back in 2020. I can see on the school committee agenda that the robotics program is set to speak about getting permission to travel too. I can also see that the planning document doesn't have the German exchange program planned for any future meeting agendas. I wanted to ask that a school committee member officially request at some time, I guess it's by the end of tonight's meeting, to add the German exchange program to the next in-person meeting on the 15th. I noticed while I was reading the protocols that the primary objective of the school committee is continuous improvement and overall student achievement. I'd like to think that the German exchange program nicely fits into that objective. It's a program that can set Nashoba apart from the other schools. I'd hate to see that it get lost in the post-COVID shuffle. We're hoping that we can take advantage of the amazing resource we have in Frau Van Torn, our German teacher, and it's our hope that she and the students will get the support they need from the school community to make the program come alive again and encourage more students to explore German language. With these types of trips, I know questions of equity arise. A lot of school districts are doing away with field trips, citing them as inequitable. But I would urge Nashoba not to fall prey to this type of thinking, and that instead of taking opportunities away from students, that instead we think creatively about how to solve the problem and to include all students who are interested. So thank you for your time and your consideration, and we look forward to hopefully seeing the German exchange program on the agenda as soon as possible.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Our next member of the public who would like to engage in public comment is Liz Hess, who I think is also here.
Yep, I'm here.
Very good. Go right ahead.
Thank you. And I want to say Amy expressed everything that I wanted to say just perfectly. Thank you, Amy. We had a chance to participate in the German exchange back when my older daughter was a freshman, and it was a challenging experience, but I can't say enough positive about it. And I'm really hoping that my current senior also could have the chance to do the same kind of experience. I mean, he's a STEM kid, and the language program is a chance for him to shine in his non-STEM side. And this is just a perfect opportunity for him to get to explore that area of life. And also for us to let our kids out into the broader world. And as I understand it, we'd be going back to the same community that Nashoba's been at countless times, Weilhelm, Germany. It's kind of an opportunity to really get to know a different part of the world. And I can't see any downside to it. I really hope that we can make this work and go forward with it again.
Thanks so much. And we have one final public comment, I think, just one. And Mr. Gary Smith?
Yeah, that's right. It was myself and my wife, Jill, had also asked to talk, and we're also here to support Amy Jo and the German program. Our daughter is also a senior and has been looking forward to this trip for a very long time. My wife is actually at robotics at the school right now for a robotics meeting. Our daughter's also in the robotics program. Had a great trip last year out to Houston. That was a fabulous experience for her, and it would be great to be able to give her this experience to Germany as well, if the school board can see it in their wisdom to make that happen. So appreciate your help with that. Thanks.
Thanks so much. If I'm not mistaken, I think that is the final public comment for the evening. So we appreciate all of you coming here to speak with us. As part of our protocol, we don't necessarily respond in kind, but all of your comments are duly noted. So thank you for your participation, and we'll see you around. All right, everybody. So lost my agenda. Bear with me. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, and I'm going to turn to our noble vice chair for a motion.
Thank you. I move the consent agenda of containing the draft meeting minutes of October 11th, 2023 and the warrants of October 27th, 2023 for approval by this committee.
I'll second that. Any discussion?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Dana.
There was just a little bit of wording that needed to be changed around for the audit advisory. It's purely just clerical, though. Just putting a period at the end of surplus and adding an and somewhere. I can give those specifics to Alita if you want, or I don't know if this is the place where I'd point that out.
Yeah, only if the and changes the spirit of the sentence.
Nope, not necessarily. I think
Do
just
you know
grammatically.
where? Can you read the before and or point to us to the before and after?
Yes. So the last sentence, there were 3 recommendations for this year, comma, record a warrants payable liability, comma, a bank reconciliation to be signed by 2 people, the creator and the reviewer, insert, and reducing the school lunch surplus, period, removing the last and.
Got it.
Purely
Thanks, Dana.
grammatical. Sorry.
Thank you. So I'm sure Alita's all over that. All right. Any other discussion? All right. So we will make those small clerical additions. There's no really need to alter the motion if everybody's okay with that. All right. Let's take the roll. I vote yes. Sharon.
Yes.
Amy Vessels.
Yes.
Shondor. Yes. Scott Powell.
Yes.
Dana.
Yes.
Mr. Horish.
Yes.
Amy Cohen.
Yes.
And Jackie.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for that. Moving on to school committee chairperson update. I know that you guys always wait with bated breath for this, and then I never actually go through with it. There's no chairperson update. So we get to skip right over me and go to something far more interesting, and that's our student representative report. So I'll turn it over to Hansi.
Hi, everyone. So I have been talking to Dr. Boynton and Miss Boulay at the high school trying to figure out who our next representative is. And they sent out a Google form to the junior class, and we should be holding elections next week. So they should be here for the November 15th meeting. So that's exciting. So for our report, I'll start by saying that seniors are crazy busy with college applications, with our deadline being November 1st for early decision and early action. And with that said, like Q1 ends on the 2nd of November. The seniors had their senior sunrise event that took place last Friday, and it was a huge success. And we also hosted a pizza fundraiser night at Slater's on the 11th, which was also successful. And we brought in $500 for our class. The fall band concert happened last night, and our golf team competed in the Central Mass Division II Sectional Championship on Tuesday, October 24th at Maplegate, and they finished in second place and qualified for states. The boys and girls soccer are playing in a Central MA Championship games this week, with games on Tuesday and likely Thursday. We'll check in on those results. And then the girls volleyball tournament game is on Wednesday. That's all I have tonight.
Awesome. Thanks, Hansi. Any
Thanks.
questions for Hansi before she goes? All right. Well, as always, we appreciate you being here, Hansi, and we'll see you next time, hopefully with a partner.
Of course, hopefully. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
All right. Bye. All right, everybody, we're going to move right on to the superintendent's report. I'll turn it over to Kirk.
Madam Chair, thanks for that recognition. Good evening, everyone. Getting into the superintendent's report, I have 2 items for you, and then I'll turn it over to Ms. Friend for the 3rd item. First thing, just wanted to update the committee on the Pupil Personnel Services Director search. I have completed the listening sessions. I've hosted almost 20 listening sessions with faculty and staff, as well as community members over the summer, and gleaning out lots of information and trends and ideas and thoughts about the future of our department and how we're going to craft a process around ensuring that we have a candidate that can meet the wide variety of needs out there in the world that this position entails. But in the update, you can see I've outlined a draft calendar for the hiring process for this position, with the position being posted in December, running for a month. And then we'll review and screen those applicants the week of January 26th, of which the following week we'll host panel interviews and have representatives from the parents and caregivers, educators, administrators, and school committee. I'll look to our representatives here on the school committee that serve as the CPAC liaison to join us in that interview process if available. We will then be hosting site visits the week after that, where the candidates come to the school system and we have a chance to meet with central office officials and then tour the schools and meet with principals and visit some classrooms, with candidate forums via Zoom being hosted immediately at the end of that day visit. This is, if you remember, exactly the kind of process that I went through when I did my superintendent candidacy, concluding my day having a community conversation. And then at the February 14th school committee meeting, it is my hope that we have a candidate that I can bring before you as a recommendation for hire to enter into negotiations. This is one of the candidates that is outlined in state statute that needs school committee approval. It's not an interview that evening. I will be briefing you along the way. Rather, it's an opportunity to review that, ask questions of me, and then you vote approval. The candidate will be invited to the session as part of that and would have an opportunity to, present themselves to the committee. So with that, I'll move on to talk about our updated tiered focus monitoring review for special education and civil rights. In your meeting materials is that report. This is a report that a review that is conducted by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education here in Massachusetts to ensure that we're falling into compliance with all the requirements. And so we are happy to report that we did not have any actions we need to take on the tiered focus monitoring review. We're very pleased about that. I'm going to publicly once again apologize for our policy subcommittee as the documents I needed to update relative to the policy around physical restraint is not policy. In fact, it was the procedures that we were given guidance on during the process from DESE last year. And procedures are posted alongside policy so that you can see how we enforce what is within the policy to meet state statute as well. So those procedures have been updated to the 2021 updates and were posted for your benefit. So before we move on to updates on strategic work and the professional development we had just recently, I'll take any questions from the committee.
Anybody have any questions on those two items? Maybe Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, with regard to the search, were you recognizing me or Amy Vessels? I didn't even look. Okay. With regard to the search for pupil personnel services director, you mentioned that you did about 20 focus groups. What would you say is split between, like what percentage of the folks involved in those focus groups were parents or caretakers?
I did 4 parent groups this summer, and then it's not percentage, Amy, it's more targeted group. I met with counselors, I met with preschool, I met with each school's special education team, I met with the team chairs, I met with occupational therapists, physical therapists, I met with SLPs. So it was around sort of based on their sector as opposed to like a general listening session.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on those two items? All righty, let's keep going.
Yeah, at this point, I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Friend, who would like to update you on the great professional development work and strategic work that we engaged in this most recent Friday. Assistant Superintendent Friend, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Downing, and thank you to the committee as well for your continued support. As Superintendent Downing indicated, last Friday, we held our first district-wide early release professional development session for the year, marking the kickoff of our year-long efforts for professional learning and district work. We had 34 job-specific sessions in place with a goal of working to meet the varied needs of our grade levels, content areas, and related service provider roles and responsibilities, of which they are varied. I've included a link to our year at a glance for you in the update so that you could take a look at the specific topics and sessions as articulated. The goal for each session, and will continue to be throughout the year, is developed in support of the initiatives of our strategic plan. Our classroom educators are continuing the efforts initiated last year to align, build, and redesign units as we work to bring our portrait of a Nashoba graduate and to life and create experiences for students that are not only content rich, but engaging and learner-centered. Our early release professional learning model is supported by a distributed leadership model. We had 14 curriculum facilitators at the K-8 level. 11 of those are teachers, and the high school is being led by our department heads. The Department of Teaching and Learning has provided training and resources to all curriculum facilitators, including the department heads, and will continue to do so throughout the year. We look forward to keeping this committee updated, and we also look forward to sharing examples of our work in the spring.
I think you're muted, Kirk. Yeah.
Of course, I was just saying, Madam Chair, we'll take any questions from the committee at this time.
Very good. Any questions for teaching and learning? I will say the document shows a plethora of good work. So that's exciting, and it all is very neatly tied into the strategic plan. So that's great. Thanks, Laura.
I would also add, it wasn't in the update, but we have sent out a survey to our faculty and staff to receive feedback around the clarity of the goals and the expectations and intended outcomes. And so we're working through that survey feedback now.
Madam Chair, the way I will amplify your comments is that if I could get in a time machine and go talk to Assistant Superintendent Downing in his previous school district, he would use Ms. Friend's model as an exemplar for how to design the early release days. It really is an exemplar model, but it's focused work, and that's the key. It lifts the work of a plan.
Yeah, I particularly like the fact that you have this roadmap for the whole year so that faculty knows like how much time they have and they can kind of manage their time properly. So, any other questions or comments? All right, that'll do it for the superintendent's report. Thanks, Kirk, on that. And Laura.
Thank you.
So over to new business, we have a very important piece of work here. That is to vote to award the district's $30 million general obligation school project loan. And maybe Kirk, you could tee this up a little bit so that everybody understands what we're doing here.
That's right. And I'm going to introduce Finance and Operations Director, Mr. Mulcairn, once this evening, even though he has a plethora of agenda items to now go through. But yes, this is an exciting moment for us, Madam Chair, as we are at the moment of which we're securing initial funding for the Nashoba Regional High School building project. And in order for us to get things moving, there's some nuances that need to be explained out that Mr. Mulcairn will share with you. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mr. Mulcairn.
Thank you, Superintendent Downing, and thank you to the school committee. Good evening. So as you're aware from the memo that I sent ahead of tonight's meeting, our strategy for financing the high school project is to do so in stages. This allows for a walk-up to the eventual full debt assessment for our member towns while allowing us to meet our cash flow needs and stay flexible in the future loan market. I'd like to thank the members of our bond advisory group, including school committee representative Scott Powell, for their time and efforts in collaborating with the district administration on the financing strategy. Our first stage was put out to market for $30 million with a 30-year term. The bond sold to Jeffries LLC. We had a total of 9 bids, which our financial advisors felt was a very strong response to going out to market. The coupon rate is 5%, but the true interest cost is 4.642%. After we, do the calculations of the premium and things like that, the financial advisors have been doing a lot of education for me over the last couple of weeks that we've gone through this process. The motion for approval in front of you this evening will allow the district to continue to move forward with the legal paperwork on the first bond. It's certainly an exciting time for the district. We're moving forward with development and design. Our first invoices for the first invoices beyond the feasibility study will be coming in next month. And before you know it, we'll have shovels in the ground and some very exciting groundbreaking moments, I'm sure. I believe that Ms. Masterson is going to scroll through the motion. We don't need to read the large table, Ms. Cohen. You simply refer to the table below. The table after that you can read in detail, but there's a lot of numbers on that first table, and our bond counsel let me know that we don't need to read, you can just refer to it. But the rest of the motions do need to be read verbatim. So once we're completed with the motion, I'll be reaching out to School Committee Secretary Gleason for signature that the motion was approved. Our expectation on receiving the funds from the bond is essentially the day after the next school committee meeting. This will allow us to, before minute approval, just to have it certified by the school committee secretary and get it back to bond council, and we can continue to move forward and the real work on our new building can begin. So thank you for your time and allowing me to preface the motion this evening, and I'll turn it back over. Thank you.
Thanks, Ross. I wonder if anybody wants to ask a question just on process, or if everybody's ready for the motion, that's fine too. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, so first, thanks a lot, Ross, for the process of getting us here and the work you did with the committee as well as the advisors to get us to this point. As I previously gave you the heads up on, I was curious about, what terms you considered before you arrived at the 30-year term, because I know the bond market's got kind of a kink in it at the 10-year time frame as far as interest rates are concerned.
So given where we're at as far as where we'll be at the end of this project, so if we went with a 10, Obviously, that compresses the time frame on what we need for cash flow needs now, which would include a higher annual debt assessment. And we really feel like the over doing the 30-year and stretching it out allows us to just walk in a little bit more slowly to where we'll finally be. There's a lot of pros and cons right now, and I wouldn't pretend to be the financial expert on bond markets or anything like that. And we've learned a lot. But I would say that given the financial situation, you know, and volatility that we see, I think we feel really good about where we're at today. And this gets us started. In about a year from now, we'll be doing the same exercise. And if we feel like we need to do something more short term, then we'll do so. We'll learn a lot next week when the Fed reconvenes to look at interest rates, and whatever decision or non-decision comes out of that meeting will tell us a lot about the short-term future, and we'll continue to be paying close attention to the market.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on process before we get to the beefy motion? Okay, it looks like we're ready. So everybody buckle up. Amy has a long piece to read here for us, but the motion is very specific and must be read verbatim. Go ahead, Amy.
Hey guys, I'm going to do my best here. The motion is, we hereby determine in accordance with GLC 70B that the cost of the high school construction project authorized by vote of the district school committee passed on August 2nd, 2023, being financed with the proceeds of a portion of the bonds defined below, together with all other bonds and notes of the district previously issued to pay costs of this project, does not exceed the portion of the total cost of the project that is not being paid by the school facilities grant. And we hereby approve the issuance of notes and bonds to finance this project under GL Chapter 70B. I further move that the sale of the district's $28,930,000 general obligation school project loan, Chapter B 70 bonds, dated November 9th, 2023, parentheses, the quote-unquote bonds, parentheses, to Jeffries LLC at the price of $30,162,499.22 plus accrued interest, if any, is hereby approved and confirmed. I further move that the bonds maturing on November 1st, 2053. You want me to try to zoom this up? Oh, I'm okay. I thought I was reading off of my own copy, but I'm reading off of these. Sorry for that. Okay. I further move that the bonds maturing on November 1st, 2053, parentheses, a quote unquote term bond, parentheses, shall be subject to mandatory redemption or mature as follows. Term bond due November 1st, 2053. Date, November 1st, 2049. The principal amount is $1,510,000. Date, November 1st, 2050. The principal amount is $1,585,000. Date of November 1st, 2051. The principal amount is $1,665,000. The date of November 1st, 2052. The principal amount is $1,755,000. The date of November 1st, 2053 is $1,845,000. I further move that in connection with the marketing and sale of the bonds, the preparation and distribution of a notice of sale and preliminary official statement dated October 18th, 2023, and a final official statement dated October 24th, 2023, parentheses, the quote official statement, unquote, parentheses, each in such form as may be approved by the district treasurer, be and hereby are ratified, confirmed, approved, and adopted. I further move that the bonds shall be subject to redemption at the option of the district upon such terms and conditions as are set forth in the official statement. I further move that the district treasurer and the chair of the committee be and hereby are authorized to execute and deliver a continuing disclosure undertaking in compliance with SEC Rule 15C2-12 in such form as may be approved by bond counsel to the district, which undertaking shall be incorporated by reference in the bonds for the benefit of the holders of the bonds from time to time. I further move that we authorize and direct the district's treasurer to establish post-issuance federal tax compliance and continuing disclosure procedures in such forms as the district treasurer and bond counsel deem sufficient, or if such procedures are currently in place, to review and update said procedures in order to monitor and maintain the tax-exempt status of the bonds and to comply with relevant security laws. I further move that any certificates or documents relating to the bonds, parentheses, collectively the documents, quote unquote, parentheses, may be executed in several counterparts, each of which shall be regarded as an original and all of which shall constitute one and the same document. Delivery of an executed counterpart of a signature page to a document by electronic mail in a PDF, quote unquote, file, and by other electronic transmission shall be as effective as, could you please scroll down, Alita? Delivery of a manually executed counterpart signature page to such document. And electronic signatures of any of the documents shall be deemed original signatures for the purposes of the documents and all matters relating thereto, having the same legal effect as original signatures. I further move that each member of the committee, the district secretary, and the district treasurer be and hereby are authorized to take any and all such actions and execute and deliver such certificates, receipts, or other documents as may be determined by them or any of them to be necessary or convenient to carry into the provisions of the foregoing votes.
I will second that. So I cannot see you all, but I'm scrolling. Does anybody have, oh, there we go. Does anybody have a question? Scott?
Sorry, I'm trying to, read through all these documents, and I'm looking at the repayment schedule. And for some reason, the repayment schedule goes through June of 2054. Is that to reflect the school district's fiscal year?
I will turn that to Ross, perhaps.
1 second. Yes, because our payments are made in November of 53.
Okay.
So the total for the fiscal year, Mr. Powell, is listed there.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. So we'll take the roll. I will vote yes. Amy Vessels.
Yes.
Sharon.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Shondor.
Yes.
Dana.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Jackie.
Yes.
And Amy Cohen.
Yes.
Great job on that, Amy. Thank you so much for persevering. Really appreciate that. All right, everybody. We're going to move right on to the promised star of our show, to finance and operations. And I'll swing it to you, Kirk, if you want.
I will once again introduce Finance and Operations Director, Mr. Ross Mulcairn, for the next 5 items.
Okay.
Thank you again for the opportunity. I appreciate the work that was just done in school committee to move forward on that. So thank you. Yes, I have several items. These are sort of annual operational steps that we take. There'll be some more next month, but in the interest of efficiency, you'll see these this evening. So the first thing that I'm presenting, Ms. Masterson, do you want me to present my screen? Okay, can you pull up the final results of operations FY23? Thank you. So the first item for this evening is the final results of operations for FY23. This is the format of the report that we would look at monthly, first with budget and warrant, and then here with the full committee. So this is essentially where the operational budget was at the date of June 30th, 2023. This does include anything that was paid potentially after that date, but encumbered in that year. As you know, if we get a bill in on the 29th of June, we're still obligated to pay it. So that first that first vendor warrant of the summer typically encompasses FY23. So that includes all of this in here. But as you can see, essentially the bottom line of the 1.68 million is where the surplus of the operational budget was at the end of the last fiscal year, as compared to the end of FY22, which is about 1.2 million. So we're up on the surplus a little bit. Some big factors on this. Certainly we talked about during the year, where there's several items in some of these, but the big savings was really around salaries. We had some significant changes in our staffing, which allowed us to employ folks at different rates based on years of experience and things like that. And you can see within those school budgets, we had significant savings on personnel. We'll be working on our balance sheet as we finish up this month from FY22. I think typically this is the point where the question about E&D comes in. I wouldn't make any claims as of right now, because we want to make sure our balance sheet is all corrected and in the right order before we submit it to the Department of Revenue. We'll be working with our auditors at the beginning of next week to get that wrapped up for submission. But we'll share more on that as we move forward into the fall. Any questions on the FY23 results of the operational budget? I can take those now.
I'm scrolling through to see if any of you guys have a golden hand, or you can just speak out. Mike.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ross. I know that we discussed this at Budget and Warrant, but could you explain how we ended up with a surplus of nearly $300,000 in insurance and benefits when those costs seem to be fixed?
Yeah, some of that was within that line for some of that insurance and benefits, but I'm just pulling up my own notes here. So we saved a good amount on some of our Medicare requirements. We also had some savings on other pieces with our retirees last year. So it was really a little bit in each. We also did better on unemployment insurance and our property, casualty, auto, all those types of things. We did well on those rates as well.
Can I just have a follow-up question?
Of course.
Ross, this is a new question that was not asked at Budget and Warrant, but when it says insurance and benefits, are we talking about all insurances that are offered by the district, including health insurance, SPED insurance? Is that everything?
Right. So that would include health, dental for active and retirees. It includes our property, our auto, our life, all those types of insurances. We have also within there our life insurance payments, things like that are all wrapped up into that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other golden hands? I do not see any.
Me, that's me.
Oh, go right ahead, me.
So I'm curious about the surplus in special education. That seems like a big chunk of money, and it seems like we're always needing in that area. So what would have changed in the last year?
Yeah, and I would not necessarily say that it was because there wasn't need. I would say that we had some situations where either if it was a salary thing, we had some positions that weren't fully filled the entire year. That was part of it. We also had some move out of students, where if that was budgeted and they moved partway through the year, that money would therefore not be spent during the year.
If I may add, Madam Chair.
Sure. Go ahead, Kirk.
Just to provide some color to that, when we look at the special education line at 11,120,000, 208 is less than 2% of that target, and getting under 2% is actually quite a tremendous feat when crafting such a do a volatile budget with special education because we oftentimes have to, when we have to pay for programming for students that come in after the school year started in the budget season. So to land with under 2% there, I think is actually quite close to the target.
Got it?
Yep.
Go ahead, Dana, did you have...
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see the 2%, and in any other bucket, I'd be like, that's great. But I think that would probably be one bucket that if we went a little over, I would be, wouldn't be too mad about. But my other follow-up question was, if we had somebody leave in the middle of the year and we didn't have a position that was filled, would that then come out of the substitute teachers bucket? Is that where those funds would be pulled? Like, we wouldn't be pulling a specific teacher that was substituting for the special ed program. It would just be like a general floater.
No, so substitute teachers is the big bucket, but within that is our daily subs and then also our long-term subs. So if we had somebody who went on family leave or went on a longer term medical leave and that position was filled with a long-term sub, that would come out of that bucket.
So for special education, if there is a position that isn't filled, there are not substitutes that we pull into that role, correct? That role just would not be filled at all.
Well, we would work to fill it with a long-term sub if the person was returning. If the person resigned from their position, we would look to fill that with a full-time person, teacher, and that salary would stay within special education.
Okay. Like I said, I'm not familiar with how it works in education. I just, again, like in the day-to-day, if there was somebody that came in and filled that position, that wouldn't come out of the special.
Day-to-day substitutes are also paid out of the substitute teacher line. So if somebody, their child had an appointment
for special education, though. So would you get a substitute teacher for a special education position that was not currently filled and that you were in the process of trying to fill? Or would that just not be filled until there was a long-term role established?
So I think
I can answer this question, Ms. Mulcairn. In the sense that we hire a daily substitute or a long-term sub, that comes out of the substitute teacher's budget. When we find the teacher to permanently fill a position, it then is attributed to the special education budget. So for instance, we did have some long-term subs for some FMLA leaves that came out of the substitute teachers line. We had a position filled at the center school in April-ish of last year, if I'm just drawing off the top of my head, that would have come out of the special education line because that was a permanent hire for the position.
Okay.
All right. So again, I'm scrolling, guys. Oh, there we go. All right, Ross, it looks like we're ready to move on to the next piece.
Okay. Moving on to the revolving funds. So the revolving funds are presented in sort of several, I'll call them chunks within this report. And I tried to highlight those in the green line, and I'll just walk through those. So in general, as school committee may or may not be aware, depending upon your time on the committee, revolving funds are not part of the operational budget. They have specific purposes outside of the operational budget. I'm going to walk through sort of in general these, and I don't want to belabor the evening by getting into too much detail, but I can give you the basics on each of these. So within our sort of general revolving funds, the first one, the custodial building revolving, is really our facilities revolving. That's where we can take in revenue from building rental, and then it can be used to offset things like utilities and the like. Tuition and transportation, that's when we have students come in on tuition. That's a pretty rare occasion, but we did obviously have something here last year where we had a student tuitioned into the district, potentially through special education. And that's where that is living. SAT prep and revenue, obviously that's sort of self-explanatory. It's used for the SAT operation at the high school. Lost book, same thing, pretty explanatory. Lost books can be purchased or reimbursed through there if a family loses a book. Graduation, same thing, high school graduation. Guidance, the guidance department has access to this for lots of different things, bringing in speakers, using it to expend for enhancing what they do within their department. The Rollington High School gift expenses, or if they've taken any gifts during the year, they can be used for the specific purposes outlined in those accounts. Preschool salaries, excuse me, the preschool revolving, that's where we take in the revenue from preschool tuition and payments, and we use it to offset that program. E-rate, so this is certain categorical pieces of technology qualify for E-rate reimbursement. So last year we took in reimbursement, and we'll be using it this year to offset any needs that we have. It's pretty specific. It's a federal program, and we actually work with a contractor or a consultant to help us with that process, because it's a lot of legwork. And if you have somebody that specializes in it, it really helps. High school parking fee is self-explanatory. I believe they charge students about $70 per parking permit, and that goes into that count, and that can offset things that they need to do with parking at the high school. Obviously, we're in a little bit of a different position. We wouldn't look to be relining the high school parking lot in the next couple of years, but those are the types of things that can be used for, and that might be really beneficial for the high school as we move forward. The EMT program has its own revolving account. When we run flu shot clinics, we have a revolving account for that if necessary. And then Sawyer has two accounts for some reason. One is a typical gift, and then one is a special education gift account. Again, those were set up at some point, goes forward. Circuit breaker, that's where we receive reimbursement from the state, and then we move forward from there. We have center school donations, and that's again, a gift account. We take in our school choice funds through the revolving as well. And then we do also have the high school turf and field expense if that's necessary. Right. And Hale has a gift account. And then the Alice Eaton grant is a really specific grant in Stowe that was set up several years ago, and has actually a group that works or typically would work with our nurse leader when we have needs to come out of that. Any quick questions on the sort of the general revolving funds?
I have a quick one, Ross. I didn't know that why does the circuit breaker act as a revolving account? Because that does pay for operational things.
Correct, but it's a reimbursement for the state, and you can carry it over, so it's not locked into one fiscal year. There's a standard set of revolving accounts that's approved through the state, and that's one of those.
Got it. I'm going to go to Scott, maybe.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand more broadly what I'm looking at here as far as, so first of all, is the idea of these accounts is they're off the district's books, right? They have their own revenue sources, is how these accounts working?
They're not part of the operating budget, but they are on our books.
Okay. And so is a positive number on here represent money into the district?
Correct, except with the accounting feature of a revenue coming in, it shows as a in the parentheses as a negative because it's a revenue.
So how do I interpret the fact that the green line that says revolving fund 250 has a positive number of 1.6 million in the budget? What does that mean? You expected all those accounts added together to produce 1.6 million in revenue over the course of the year? How do I interpret that?
That is the balance at the end of last year. It just reflects in the balance sheet in the sheet as a budget. So the end of FY22, those were the numbers.
And so then what does the YTD column represent?
That's any activity during the year.
And so what it looks like those all three of those columns were added up to get to the budget balance column?
Correct.
Are those columns really additive?
Well, remember that with the revenue, the way that the sheet works shows as a negative.
Or not a negative, but in parentheses.
Correct.
So when you add up that whole column, Scott, plus and minus were to the good 183. this year right now, right, Russ?
Well, at the end of FY23.
Or you're projected, yeah. And so what you're saying is that in our revolving accounts right now, we have $1.8+ million, but they all need to be spent on that money needs to be spent on very specific things.
Within those accounts, but it's a 1.8 million at the end of June of 23.
Any other questions, Scott?
I think I just need more time to digest this, and it might be something we want to discuss at the next Budget and Warrants Committee meeting.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Just throw it on the agenda. Any other questions? Mike?
Yes, Ross, could you elaborate a little bit more about what you said about a number not existing on the general ledger budget line, but existing in year to date as a negative? You said something to the effect of it being a revenue stream. Is that right?
Right. So, well, I want to be clear. These are on our general ledger. They're not part of the operating. It's not part of what is a voted budget to say these are expenses for the next FY, and these are the revenues we need to incur because of it. It is just it's separate from the operating budget. They have very specific purposes. At one point, a school committee meeting approved each one of these in the past at different times for specific purposes.
So I'm just looking at the top of the first page, just pulling one randomly. I'm looking at custodial building revolving revenue. So how is that considered a revenue source?
So if you look at that third line, custodial building revolving, it says REV, that's the revenue line.
Right.
And revenue in our accounting system in this form shows in parentheses as a negative.
I guess my question is, in what way are we generating revenue for this particular line?
So each one of these has their own different revenue source, but for that one specifically, building rental.
Oh, I see. Underneath it. Custodial / building, is that right? No?
Correct.
Well, the rental. Okay. Yeah, I think this is something we'll pull up for budget and warrant if we want to go into more detail.
Because, for example, Ross, on the building rental stuff, we don't pay for rentals out of the operating budget because we couldn't possibly predict that. We have this fund that, like, if the basketball organization rents the building, we put their money into this account, and that's how we pay the custodians who open the building for them.
Or we use as an offset for utilities. And if there's an offset that was used out of this account, it is shown in the budget.
Oh, and that's the only time you can put the revolving fund into the operational budget.
You would have to go through the budget process. Right.
Interesting. Amy Cohen.
I think that leads into my question about school choice, because I recall seeing school choice revenue as part of our budget discussion last year. So, but I also see it as a revolving fund here. So I think it gets to what Leah was just saying and maybe what you were saying, but could you explain how those relate? Like, how are we showing the school choice revenue on the budget that we're voting, but it's here as a revolving account?
So let me get back to you on that one because I don't have the budget pulled up, but I know what you're referring to. So if it would be okay, I just want to make sure I have my answer clear before I respond.
Sure. It would be great. Maybe it would be a great thing to put a little agenda item in the future, because school choice is new to all of us again, relatively speaking. So understanding how that's going to wrap in, especially once a year is behind us of school choice, and we're going to start.
We'll certainly know for the budget process where we're going to be at for FY24 on revenue and expenditures, for lack of a better term, but money in, money out on our school choice. So that might be, I'd want to do that.
I wonder if we could put in the parking lot, and Kirk, maybe you and I can just talk about this later, but we could put like a little note, like a school choice update, because I don't know that we ever shared with the community who ended up taking it or how many. ended up taking advantage of the limited opportunities. And we could also talk about the fiscal implication.
Yeah, happy to do that. I'll put it in the parking lot. We'll make sure we bring it forward before the first of the year, so you have an understanding of that before budget season.
Thank you.
That'd be great. Any other questions about the revolving accounts? I have another one for you, Ross. I'm sorry to belabor this.
No, it's okay.
We were crushing the clock, and now on something like parking, a community member might look at this and say, oh, they're building a slush fund. Can you just speak to like how these things, right? So we collect all this money. It feels like the parking revolving fund is like really big right now.
Yep.
But it's limited to how we can use it. I mean, is this something that we could use to help what is likely going to become a parking problem with the new construction?
So I would be very careful to differentiate between that type of issue with the new building, because my understanding would be those would be built into the construction cost, right? If we're dealing with whatever it may be. However, in the future, let's say the high school, they get their parking lot and it's lined and all these things, and they decide that through the system that they want to implement operationally at the high school, they want to number those. This would be a fund that they can use to pay for a company to come in and number those. But any cost that's going to be with the new high school at the parking lot. Now, if we were going to do some paving, let's say we weren't building a new building and we needed to pave a section of the parking lot, we could use this fund to do that. I wouldn't do that now because it doesn't make sense that we're going to tear it down, right? Or pave over it, or build whatever is going to be on that parking lot. But each one of these has very specific uses. I'm also, and I work with Superintendent Downing, obviously, but down the road as we add to the future transparency side, it might be worth giving a little section on what the revolving accounts are and what they're used for, so it's publicly facing.
Excellent.
I would just then add, so a couple things. You can see the summary of the athletic revolving as well. So there's some specific accounts in there for each of the buildings at the middle school level. We also have some things that Ms. Rich uses these for, and there includes, things like the Hall of Fame, although there was no activity in there this year. But that's where those things go through. So you can see the summary of that. I do want to just make sure I spend a little bit more time on the next item, which is the school lunch balance, because I knew this came up through the auditor's report. So in summary, you can see what's happening here. In looking at last year's revolving school lunch funds versus this year, 22 versus 23, we spent more money in 23 than we did in 22, which is good. However, we're still adding to that surplus issue. So I've been out and about in the buildings looking at school lunch. I've talked with some of the kitchen staff when I've been there. I still have a couple buildings to get to, and just said in general, how's it going? Tell me about your equipment. So I know that we have some identified need out there to replace some equipment. And I've also let Mr. Overcash know we need to look at our supplies and our procurement. And if we can provide, a different level of quality or whatever it may be more local, I'm going to entrust Mr. Overcash to do that within his department. But also looking to survey families and to survey our students to say what's working, what's not working. Because if we have a way to improve it, even if it's a one-time improvement, like a type of, equipment where we can do a better job, giving kids, and I'm going to spitball here, a yogurt bar where they can get yogurt and they can get different toppings, and we have to buy a certain piece of equipment to put that out. Let's do it. So that's one of the goals within my department this year, is to make sure that we can take care of this surplus, and we do so to improve the experience of students.
Great. Any questions on that piece? I love the idea of you trying to improve the school lunch experience. I think it's very important. I know to my children, but perhaps to many.
Extended days here. That's a self-operating program as well. We take in revenue through the tuition, through the fees that are paid by families. And we use those to obviously pay employees and take care of other aspects of that program. And then lastly, you see the student activities accounts here. So each one of our schools has a student activities account. Any of these that are over a certain amount of activity during a year get audited. And we actually just, our accounts payable, accounts receivable specialist who works in our office, Kylie Harris, does a lot of the working with the building secretaries and admin assistants on the reconciliation of those accounts with our treasurer's books. And I just had her go through a workshop on student activities because I want to make sure that we improve our self-auditing process. So each year, if it's not done through the auditors, the expectation is we do some level of a self-audit. We need to make sure that we have a process in place and that it's the same one followed each year. So she did that. She's reached back out to the course instructor for some things like what questions should we be asking, how often we should be doing this, how do we do our own testing and our own checking on our accounts to make sure we're doing everything we need to do. So again, just trying to build some operational standards and improvements here so that we can make sure that, especially for our student activities accounts, because those are for specifically students and shouldn't be spent on anything but that. That's where the fundraising comes in for DECA and goes back out to pay. So obviously, all these things that we're talking about when we're presenting student experience, a lot of these things are our student activity accounts.
Amy Cohen.
Yeah, regarding these student activity accounts, how are balances building up in there if money is coming in? Like, I'm picturing them being used for things like field trips. So if there's like a cost for a field trip, you're told what it is, you pay the money, it goes into an account, it goes out to pay for the field trip. So I'm just curious how you get to $175,000 in a revolving account for the high school student expense. Is that because money has been received that hasn't been spent yet, or?
Correct. Or it may be on purpose building up. So you think about a class, if they start to generate revenue through fundraising freshman through junior year, that money's building up with the expectation that they want to use it for their senior year activities.
Okay. And then the second part of my question is, are these funds what is helping make trips affordable for students who have a financial need?
They can, but I don't want to say that's always the case, because sometimes there might be another supplemental source or something like that that comes in. So if there's a donation, let's say for one of the DESE programs at the middle school, I'll pick on Miss Wren because I know that she used to always go to school committee as principal to say, we've got a donation in from a family in town or from an organization in town that wants us to go to support and supplement the trip for students who might have that need. That would go into the student activities account, and the school operationally would work to make sure that funding goes to where it needs to go.
So it's possible that not all the money in here is earmarked for specific use, and that some of it is there for those types of situations. Like,
it's not. That type of money would have to come in for a specific purpose as it comes through here and would have to go out through that specific purpose. Mm-hmm. But if there's general fundraising, let's say done by the yearbook club, mm-hmm. they might build something up over time and decide to use it for, this year we can do more color pages or whatever it may be. But that's really the intent here, is so that these things can live while it's still, under the purview of the district. It can be specific to students. And I think at the high school, a lot of times they end up making decisions with their advisor on how to spend that money.
And just one last question. I'm sorry to keep going here, but is there a cap on how large those accounts the balances in those accounts can get for the?
No, it's not. It's not like the auditors would. I think that we would be notified if it was unusual for a district our size. Okay. But I have not, in my experience, heard that you can only reach a certain limit. Again, though, when you look at it, it may seem large, but there's obviously future expenditures that'll be coming out of that.
Thank you.
Ross, for each of the student activities accounts, do you code them by each individual student activity? Because I imagine for the high school, you must have, 40
So this
different.
is where the reconciliation comes in. We code them by building, and then we use QuickBooks out in the buildings to reconcile the accounts. So obviously, Ms. Winters at the high school has a much larger QuickBooks operation going to maintain each of those different accounts. Whereas at like center school, it's a much smaller situation where it's usually just the field trips that are coming in and out of that account.
But within the high school, for example, you have student council, DECA,
Correct.
and so they all have that. You keep account of how much each one of the groups has.
We keep account of that through the high school administration, but they don't show up as separate lines within our ledger. So the high school has their lines on the ledger as just the high school. But at the high school, that's where they keep track of all that. That's why it's reconciled. That's why it's audited. And again, that's why we want to work on our self-auditing too.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the treasurer's report, end of FY23.
Great. Again, so here is from our treasurer, Ms. Chartier, who actually was here tonight doing her treasuring activities. So this is the June 30th report of all accounts. Again, these are treasurer accounts. These are our accounts out in banks. So you'll see several different ones here. Unibank, we use this one for our money going in and going out for payroll and things like this. On this date of June 30th, we didn't have a large balance in there because we most likely just paid out through the warrant process. You can see our OPEB balance. If you cross this over to our OPEB valuation by Siegel on the same date, it's the same number. We also have accounts set up that are smaller through TD Bank, Hometown, and then you can see our general operating through Clinton Savings. And we also have all of our student activities, as you can see listed here, with Clinton Savings in a separate account. So again, nothing operationally comes in or out of that account. It is strictly for our student activities. At the MMDT account, which is the Mass Municipal Deposit Trust, we have a significant amount of our money in that for the reason is that it returns at a large rate. And that is why it stays there. Now, when we go to pay payroll, we go to do vendor payments, that money gets transferred into the smaller Unibank account and then gets made out in those payments. And we repeat that cycle during warrants throughout the year. I would look to show you sort of, you can see how the activity happens during a month. If you look at the beginning balance of the month at the top, it was around 17 million. And then by the end of the month, it was around 17 million. And then you can see through the activity, it's down to 11 million. So you might look at that $12 million number and say, is that sort of like what we have available? No, because a lot of it's encumbered. A lot of it's going to get paid out through vendor payments, through payroll, things like that. But this is the cash on hand as of that date within all of our accounts.
Not seeing any golden hands, am I? Thanks, Lita. Mike Horish?
I didn't realize my camera was off. So Ross, the number for the May balance is about 8.5 million. Can that number that it feels high to be accounted for by the warrants, but are all those numbers matching the warrants up to that month?
I'm just trying to make sure I understand the question you're asking before
Yep. So the expenses are roughly 8.7 million.
Yes, with the exception of any of those checks, because we do. So, for example, if we looked at just our vendor payments, we do vendor payments through ACH, which is really just direct deposit, right, to our vendors, and we also do checks. So, if there's checks outstanding from that warrant process that month, they would not necessarily show up as an expense because they haven't been cashed.
Okay, my point though is that the expenses tie right back to the monthly warrants.
Yes, but again, to do a 1-for-1, I don't know if you'd be able to do that because of that phenomena. It'd be an exercise I could run through with Ms. Chartier for sure. I'd be curious myself.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Amy Cohen.
Yeah, could you just refresh our memories about the MMDT account and why?
Yeah.
Why
The
do
reason.
we have an account that's $10 million? And
Yeah. So a couple things. Yep. The reason why we keep, and again, I've looked back and these sort of figures match where we're at in previous years at the end of the fiscal year. So the reason that we use that as a large sort of depository is because the interest on it is typically the best that we get on any of our accounts. So that increases our return on investments, which is also a revenue source for the operating budget, which is a good thing. When we go to make vendor payments, payroll, we transfer it to Unibank, and then it goes out to people from there. The reason why the balance is there is because during May, let's use May we receive, I'll rather say it this way, quarterly we receive our assessment payments for the town. And then we also get different revenues in from the state on Chapter 70, regional transportation reimbursement, whatever it may be, during the year. We still have encumbrances and liabilities that need to get paid out that might not be reflected there that are part of FY23. So for example, our teachers that take 26 payments instead of 22 throughout the year, they're receiving 4 paychecks during the summer. Times X amount of employees, that money is there and it gets transferred, then paid out during the summer. So I wouldn't look at it as that's our balances for the end of FY23 because there's things that still have to get paid.
Okay.
All right. Let's move on to results of operations for July through September.
I'm almost there, folks. I promise.
Haha. This is great, Russ.
Alita, can you pull up the July through September? Thank you. So on the end of FY23 operating budget report that you saw several moments ago, you really only saw the green because we used to keep in previous iterations of this, we had our budget, we had our expended and encumbered, we had expected expenses, and then we had an expected balance. And I think it said budget versus actual. So I worked this summer to revise this report because I really wanted to make sure it had more clarity to it. And we also ran this by budget and warrant. So thank you to Mr. Hirsch, Mr. Simon, and Mr. Powell for their feedback on this. So what I've done is anything that's in green is the actuals for the month or up to the end of that month. So I will take just I'm going to take, I'll use the facilities department. So the facilities department budget was just over $5 million up until September 30th. So July through September 30th, there was approximately 2.8 million expended or encumbered, which left a balance of 2.2 million. And through some great advice through budget and warrant, we've added the percentages column just to give you a sense of what percent of the actual budget is that balance. That's everything that's already been expended or encumbered. So if we wrote an open PO for our fuel for the year, that would already be in here. Then we look at the next, and this is where I sort of differentiated out the report to make sure it was more clear. What is our projected expenditures coming out of our facilities budget? We have other utility payments that need to be made. If we use all of our scheduled maintenance, those types of things that we expect to do during the year, that's approximately 2.1 million, which will leave an expected balance of about $112,000. Which is approximately 2.2% of the facilities budget. So we've done that across all of the cost centers to show you the totals. So as of the end of September, the expectation as of that date, obviously we can't project everything, but it projected we'd be about if all those things come to pass, $674,000 in surplus at the end of FY24. And you can see that. How does that compare to last year at this time with our expectations and our projections?
Sorry, guys, I lost my mute button. This is actually really helpful, especially for lay people. Any golden hands on this one?
I would just add in, I was really concerned about being able to squeeze the percentages in, but I'm glad that I did. Mr. Simon, I think, was a big advocate for this, and it actually is very helpful for folks to be able to, how far have we come, right? And how far do we expect to be? I think it's a really good add-on, so thank you there.
Amy Cohen?
Yeah, I find this format much easier to understand, and I like the changes. So thank you for spending the time to bring this before the committee.
Ross, on one of them, they go into the negatives. I think it was Mary Rowlandson's. You're muted.
Sorry, Alita, can you just pull it up, because I need to show two buildings on that one. Okay, so if you look at Mary Rowlandson, where it's projected to have a negative balance at the end of the year, I need you to couple that with the Florence Sawyer School. And thank you for bringing it up, because this is a perfect example. Over the summer, or excuse me, after the budget was voted towards the end of the school year, we realized that Florence Sawyer's enrollment for kindergarten would be down and they'd be able to go to 3 sections. In the meantime, Mary Rowlandson needed an additional one over what they were budgeted. So a kindergarten teacher and a kindergarten instructional assistant went from one budget to the next. We don't transfer that money necessarily, because I think we've talked about this at Budget and Warrant. It's good to track our expenditures over time, because we need to make sure we understand what's happening, and we can talk. To transfer that money doesn't necessarily do anything other than change the numbers. But I think it's important to show that things happen after the budget's voted to meet the needs of students, and this is what happens as a result. So you can see there's almost a little bit of a 1-for-1. The other pieces on that are there's some higher.
I'm sorry, Ross, you said it was Mary Rowlandson to what other building?
I was from Sawyer to Mary Rowlandson.
Thank you.
So you can see where the surplus is for Sawyer balances almost out that deficit for Mary Rowlandson. A couple of other things with regards to salaries. We also a teacher transferred there. We have the dean position. Some of those other things add up to that remaining deficit at Mary Rowlandson.
Thank you.
Not the dean, excuse me, the assistant principal.
All right, I'm not seeing any other golden hands. So maybe we'll move to the last piece.
So I think you're all aware, and a lot of you are educators, know that there's substitute questions out there in general. The first place we want to start with addressing our substitute needs is our nurses. Our substitute daily nurse rate right now is $125 a day. It's a difficult position to fill, and sort of some of the local rates that are comparables for us, and just sort of the market conditions in general necessitates that we take some action. We've seen with Mrs. Gilbicki's absence, she would fill in sometimes and do her work from the buildings, but we really need to have a stronger plan, even if and hopefully when we fill that nurse leader position. So what we're recommending right now is to increase the substitute nurse rate from $125 a day to $210 per day. We're expecting and obviously hopeful that will build our substitute pool for nurses, and also make sure that we have appropriate coverage for our student health and wellness needs on a daily basis. And we'd be looking for a vote at the next meeting on that.
Any preliminary questions on that? We can debate it more at the next meeting as well. Amy?
Is it possible to show the comp data to the school committee?
Yeah, I can bring that to the next meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
I think that would just help inform us about why you're recommending the rate you're recommending.
Can you conjure right now what the sub pay is that we recently increased for educators?
It's $100 a day, and that increase was, I want to say FY 19 or 20.
It was actually 2 years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That rate also is significantly below the market. And we will be coming to this committee at the future to increase that rate. We've got to be competitive. Our nurse rate is demonstrably below the market right now. That will bring the comps. The rate we're recommending there falls in the middle range of those of the districts that we gathered near us. So it just shows how far below the nurse sub rates are in other systems. So, and then we also will bring our educators effort substitute lines as in the future as well.
How do you manage this from a budget perspective if the budget's already set and now we're looking to increase pay afterward?
So we'll have some differential there with the fact that we haven't filled our nurse leader position right now, and we're hopeful that we do. And then we'll just monitor that budget to ensure that we're staying within and on budget. But again, if we need to balance the budget elsewhere in order to make sure that we have our nurses office staffed, that's what we'll do. But we're going to be paying close attention.
I think that one other piece of data that we might need before we can agree to almost doubling the pay, even though we might want to, I don't want to get us into a position where the pay is so high that we then forego replacing a nurse because we can't afford it. And so understanding what the typical line items are and how often we need to expend. I mean, I know that teachers are out, there could be 9, 15 teachers out in a building a day. There's only 1 or 2 nurses. I just need to understand the liability there.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Amy?
Yeah, I guess one question that's occurring to me is this position and the substitute position, those are outside of our units that we have. Is that why they would be brought before the school committee for separate approval? Is that
correct?
Right.
All right, everybody.
Oh, I have a question.
Oh, go right ahead. Sorry, Dina.
It's okay. So how often do you revisit these rates? Because it sounds like, the sub position is not comparable to other markets, and the same thing now with this nurse position. Is this something that's revisited every year with the budget? Or has this not been revisited in obviously sometime?
I don't know the last time that the rates were raised prior to the one that Superintendent Downing just referenced. I don't know if anybody on the committee has any input on that, but I'm not aware of a regular practice.
Is that something that you think that we should introduce, revisiting this so we're not so far behind the market value? We kind of can grow with it versus having these giant shifts in the middle of the year when realizing that we're not getting the candidate pool that we're hoping for.
If I can jump in on that one, Madam Chair.
Sure.
Ms. Ellis, you and I are on the exact same page. I think we should do that. And we should also possibly even look at annual increases based upon the increases that are negotiated through contracts and reflect them that way. So we don't have to do regular revisits to that because it ends up being, what are you attending to? And then it's only when you find yourself in dire situations that you realize you're far out of the marketplace. So I totally support your suggestion.
Great.
I just want to offer one last piece of reference that I can at least close on for people to as we approach a vote next time. Last year in the substitute nurses line, we only expended about 52% of our budget.
Interesting.
So
Sorry,
to
one
me,
more.
that says we weren't filling it, and potentially Nurse Leader Gilbicki was doing a lot of coverage. So again, I think it deserves deeper study, like Ms. Ellis just asked, and Superintendent Downing reinforced, in our budget process, or how we structure rates.
I also want to add on to that it's plausible that our nurses, who are incredibly dedicated employees, are pushing the margins on way they should come to work themselves. And they're coming to work because they feel obligated to, because they know the substitute pool is so low, and maybe a situation where perhaps they should stay home. So this also addresses, I think, how we are looking at and treating our employees by trying to make sure we do have a pool of substitute nurses to call on if needed.
Amy Cohen.
I'm sure you're planning on this anyway, Superintendent Downing, but just to state it publicly or make a request that when you do come before the committee to review the substitute rates, if you could have a list of the other positions that aren't captured in the units, so that we can just get an idea of how many other positions are out there like this that might need to be reviewed on that annual basis. Whoops, you're muted. You're muted.
It's not my first day, right? Ms. Cohen, I like your suggestion, and if I may suggest that we take your question, and I believe, Madam Chair, that the personnel subcommittee sets the rates for other employees, that maybe the personnel subcommittee is the place to do that work, so that what we're bringing to the committee is polished.
Sounds good. All right. All right. Thank you so much, Ross, for that enlightening presentation.
Thank you for your amount of time this evening. It's appreciated.
Yeah, that was great. So we have no unfinished business, which is shocking, but true. So we're going to move on to something that was neglected at our last meeting, and that is the subcommittee reports. And we're going to start with budget and warrant. Mr. Horish.
We have no updates since our last meeting.
Very good. Let's move on to communication.
Communication continues to slog through the school committee manual.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for doing that, Sharon. It's going to be awesome. So Joe is not here right now for the NRHS School Building Committee. I don't know, Kirk, if you want to fill in, or if Amy, there's anything that we want to update the committee on here.
I could give a brief update if you'd like. Okay, so at the last school building committee meeting, which was last Thursday, we had a very brief meeting where we welcomed the Consigli Construction Corporation, who is going to be the general contractor for the work that's going to be done. We reviewed the budget status, approved some invoices, and set the next meeting date. Mostly, we're just excited for work to get underway. So
great. Let's move on to personnel and Sharon again.
Personnel, we met last week, spent some time getting me up to speed so that I feel like I have a handle on where we're headed. We are going to be preparing for the school committee training on the superintendent's evaluation. So that will be coming up in a couple of months. And we have now if Amy or Superintendent Downing, if you can get back to me with what it is that you're looking for, that you just kicked over to personnel rates for other employees, I'll make sure that gets onto our list of things to do and figure it out.
Ms. Masterson and I will put that on our daily agenda, and we'll get that to you, Ms. Pock.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Over to policy.
Yes, we met last week, and Kirk joined us. We thought that he let us know that we didn't need to or that the monitoring report showed that we just needed to add those procedures that he mentioned last time about physical restraint to our policy, so that was taken care of. And we just talked about our agenda for our next meeting is to focus on the parent communication policy.
Great. Thanks, Amy. Over to Audit Advisory. Dina.
I have no update.
All right. Thank you. And so Jackie, what's going on with Dear Jay?
Yep. So since our last school committee meeting, Dear Jay continues to review and prioritize their goals for the upcoming year. They have a lot of really great ideas, but in order to really kind of succinctly address some of the key areas of concern, they've identified 4 priority areas. That includes identification of the decision-making tool for the school committee to use to integrate inclusivity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the work that we do here at the school committee. They're also working on developing and co-creating the DEIB statement for the school committee, again, highlighting our commitment to this work. They are in the process of continuing to review, develop, and launch the web page on the district website. And lastly, they are working on support of the district's efforts regarding the equity audit. So to that end, the equity audit working group met this week to review the previous requests for proposal, the equity audits that were completed by local area schools, and participate in active discussion to inform recommendations to send to the superintendent later this week. So we've had a busy month, but a lot of really great work continuing to happen.
Awesome. And maybe we can, we probably need to understand how that work is going with the equity audit material, Kirk. So that might be a parking lot item as well.
It is, Madam Chair, at the risk of deliberating. We still have not heard on the grant funding yet, but we will give you an update at the next meeting. Whether we have an update or don't have an update, we'll provide an update.
Great. Maybe through the superintendent report.
Indeed. Ms. Friend and I will work on that.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Jackie. Over to Karen for a CPAC update.
Yes, CPAC did not have their monthly meeting in October, but they are having, I just want to put it out there that there is a meet and greet tomorrow night online with the interim director of pupil personnel services. So it's from 6:30 to 8. And if people want to submit their questions ahead of time, they can do it via email or just bring questions with them. So I just wanted to make people aware of that.
Awesome. And anybody can go, right, Karen? Not just maybe members of CPAC or?
No, anybody can go.
That's going to be a great opportunity. We appreciate our director doing that. Now over to OPEB Management Advisory Committee and Scott.
Yep. So the Management Advisory Committee has a meeting scheduled for next Wednesday where we expect to finalize our documents and vote on our proposed recommendation to this committee. So we just might want to, Leah and you and I just might want to get together and figure out how we're going to communicate this to the rest of the committee.
That would be fantastic. When do you meet next, Scott?
Next Wednesday at 7.
Do you think it's appropriate for me to join you guys?
You're certainly welcome to.
All right. Can you shoot me an email on that?
Sure.
Okay. Just trying to, yep. What time? I'm sorry.
7.
Yeah, that should work. Okay. Thanks for that, Scott. So we're going to move over to our planning calendar, guys, and items for the next agenda. If you're looking at the planning calendar, and maybe I can do a very quick share. I can see the parking lot. I hope you can too. I can't see any of you though, so please, oh yes, I can. Just yell out if you need me to know something. So these things are still kind of in our orbit. Kirk and I have talked about some of these things. Am I forgetting something to go in here, guys? Everybody's good? Okay.
Would this be a place to, I don't know how the committee members feel about talking about the exchange program, and I don't even know if we have any ability to really do anything about the exchange program, but
so we'll put it here just as a matter of course, and then Kirk and I can maybe discuss it in our Wednesday meeting, decide that if this is appropriate for our agenda because it is operational. But
yeah, I was under the impression that it was up to teachers to bring it to us for approval, and that it's not like we can decide to do something. But
yeah, and if nothing else, maybe Kirk can give us an update in his superintendent's report. That might be a good place for it.
Great.
Thank you, Amy. All right, not hearing anybody else. So we are moving on. Kirk reminded me that we don't have a meeting for 3 weeks. So you're welcome, everyone. Especially you, Ross. You get next week off. Just kidding. You do not get next week off. November 15th is our next meeting. This is what we got going on. Big deal with the school improvement plan presentations. That's exciting. And the universal screenings presentations. So that's a lot of good information there. Anything that you guys, any questions? Go ahead, Amy.
will we be voting on the school improvement plans at the next meeting, or will they be presented to us and then we'll vote the next time? Okay.
Yeah, we vote the meeting that follows, right, Kirk?
I'll just ask the committee that when we submit them to you, please have your questions ready to go for that evening, because I won't be calling the principals back for the second night when that vote's taken.
Yeah, that's kind of why I was asking, because all right, can I ask a question about those right now?
You cannot.
Okay. All right.
But you can submit it to me via email, and then I can certainly forward it to Kirk, things that you guys are hoping are in the presentation, etc.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, put everything on my list, guys. Just email me. Anything else? All right, I am going to stop sharing if I can. All right, so let's go back over to the agenda and recognize that the only item left is an adjournment, and I'm going to move to adjourn.
A second.
Thanks, Dana. Let's take the vote. I vote yes. Amy Vessels?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Shondor?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
And Mike?
Yes.
Yes. I'm going to bank this time, guys. I'm taking 52 minutes with me for next time.
Oh, no. Last time we went over by like 45 minutes. So you're paying for these things now. We're even.
Oh, all right. All right.
And it's only 27 minutes.
I'll pay my debt.